Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint, Canada's Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock in Ontario. Again, new content for you every single week, but we need your help. We need you to like it, share it, comment, help us get our conservative message out, push back against that liberal agenda because we can't do it alone. Great show lined up for you today. We have a second guest is Michael Barrett. He's the Member of Parliament from Ontario. He's going to talk about ethics. But first, of course, we have Blaine Calkins with us. He's the Member of Parliament for Red Deer Lacombe and an avid outdoorsman. You love the environment. You love hunting. You love fishing. Everything that makes Canada proud. So let's talk about that, because I think it's important to recognize that being an outdoors person means you care about conservation. You care about the environment.
Absolutely. The word conservative is about conserving.
That's right.
And that's been our hallmark throughout our political life as a political organization, as a party, with the good deeds that we've done. It's very unfortunate that as conservatives, sometimes I think we wrongly wear a brand that we don't care about the environment. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. We care very much about, especially the tangible things that we can do where the environment is concerned. You only have to go back and look at our history to know things like the acid rain and the hole in the ozone layer. I mean, these were things that were resolved under conservative leadership, both not only here in Canada but around the world, because we understood that the solution wasn't just to shut everything down. The solution actually was in changing or making the technology better so that we could continue on improving the quality of life for everybody, but also improving environmental outcomes. And that's why I spent most of my educational life and most of my professional life before politics, in one way or another, either enjoying it through my own hobbies and interests, or as a former park warden, a national park warden, and a provincial park ranger, and as a fisheries technician working with various agencies. These are the things that I'm interested in, because I know that we can do the work. We can manage our environment, we can manage our species, we can manage our forests effectively. And the answer is not what appears to be the new liberal agenda, which is just to shut everything down and turn basically our entire country, it feels like, into a park so that folks that don't live in the rural areas can come out and enjoy them at their convenience. And those of us that live out and work in the rural areas seem to have a lot of onus put on us to change our way of lives to serve the needs of others, which is unfortunate.
Which is very unfortunate, because anyone who lives in rural areas like yourself, like me, we understand that in the city you need, or big government seems to be organic, because you need rules where everyone's stacked and packed, right? You get the government telling you where you can or cannot park, what bus you're going to take to get from point A to point B, you know, how loud you can put your music. But in the rural areas, it's a little different, right? The dog bylaw on how you can put your dog on a leash or don't have to is different in the city than it is rural areas. And I think that's very important to realize, that we are different, but imposing views that shut down the rural way of life is not a way to mend this urban-rural divide that has seemed to have grown over the years.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to foment that divide.
No,
what
not
I'm
at all.
simply suggesting is that the folks that live and work and play and raise their families in the spaces between our urban centers are the ones that know best what they need to do in order to get us everything that we need in our lives, regardless of where we live. I grew up in the country, but I now live in the city, and I don't begrudge anybody for making those kinds of choices. But if you take a look at it, everything that's good in our lives comes from the spaces in between our urban areas. The food that we eat is grown on farms. The energy that fuels our homes, heating, that fuels our vehicles, that fuels our transportation network, that brings us the goods and products and services that we love, all comes from the spaces between our urban centers. You don't have to go too far. You don't find a whole lot of drilling rigs, or you don't find a whole lot of farms in our urban spaces. So when we create legislation and we create onerous things like a carbon tax, because nobody suffers more than somebody who's living remotely with something like a carbon tax, because everywhere they go and every time they do something, it costs them disproportionately more. Now, that's a choice that they make, but keep in mind that these are the same people that bring us our food. These are the same people that extract the energy and the all the other products that we need to heat our homes, to, like I say, fuel our entire economy. Even something as simple as making the lumber that is used to construct our homes, the concrete, the gravel, the rocks, all of that stuff, for the most part, comes from quite a distance away from our large urban centers. So, this is part of the way of life that is under threat, that's under attack right now, and it's we see it not only on the tax front, but with the regulatory review process that's killing jobs. That's disproportionately, I would say, affecting smaller communities, particularly in the West, with the anti-energy agenda. Nobody in Canada or nobody in the world does things as well as Canada does when it comes to energy. I grew up, like I say, in the country. It took me about 5 minutes to get my first job in the oil patch. I had to get a certificate for first aid, a certificate for H2S, and I walked into a service rig company and I said, I'm a farm boy with my tickets, and that's all I had to say, because obviously I knew how to use a tool,
how to work,
knew how to use a wrench, and had my tickets. Off to work I went. 3 months later, I had enough money for the down payment on my home. Now we see people in the West, my constituency in particular, that can't even sell their homes, due in large part to the fact that the changes in the mortgage rules the government has made. But the economy is so tough right now with basically the destruction, complete destruction of the energy sector, not only in central Alberta but across the West, has been very, very damaging. These are people that relied on common sense and good governance, because we need energy. Look, nobody is suggesting, nobody with any credibility at all is suggesting that we can live without fossil fuels for the next tens and dozens of years to come. Like, it's just not possible. It's not. Nobody in the world is suggesting that that's a feasible way to go. So why we are handicapping ourselves and why we are particularly hurting our rural economy right now is beyond me.
Well, all the resource that we do here in Canada, which is using the best technology available, we export that and we try to displace some of the bad actors. And,
Absolutely.
And if the end goal is to reduce emissions, this should be something we're championing all around the world. But instead, this Liberal government seems intent on shutting down this industry.
Well, we only have to look at some of the other examples around the world right now to see where strong economies are reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by actually expanding their oil and gas sector and doing so in an environmentally responsible way. South of the border, for example, is doing far better than we are. Look, we have not only a tremendous amount of natural resources, but we have some of the cleanest technology in the world. When it comes to, for example, using coal-fired generation. Now, here in Canada, we've made the choice to move away from coal-fired generation, but there's other countries in the world that are moving towards coal-fired generation. But because we've decided that sector of our economy is no longer worth pursuing, we've lost all of the advantages that we could have had with the technology, which is also every bit as valuable to export as the actual products and materials themselves. So now, foolishly, instead of consuming the coal here in Canada in some of the cleanest coal-fired technology there is in the world, we're now closing that technology down, not exporting it, not creating any more innovation or investment in that technology, and exporting our coal to other places in the world that are burning it in far less clean, far less technically sophisticated reactors, and we're getting actually the opposite effect that we actually want, which is a cleaner environment for everyone.
When Shannon Stubbs was on the program last week, we talked about not only investment dollars leaving this country, making it harder to sell Canadian projects, but we also talked about the brains that leave as a result, the talent, and then also the companies that are in Canada creating green technology, creating a better path forward. They start leaving too. So it's just a cascading effect of jobs, opportunity, and potential wealth that is just fleeing the country as a result of these policies by the Liberals.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's everything right from the brain drain of people who actually know how to get the resources out of the ground, the raw materials. People in my riding now who can't find a job locally are now back working in Russia. They're working in the Middle East. They're working in the United States. Alberta used to be a destination for people to come and work. They would bring their technology. They would bring their engineering degrees. They would bring their smarts, their know-how to the Canadian economy, and we all benefited from that. Now these same people have all left, plus on top of that, our own domestic Canadians, people who have been here their whole lives, are now leaving Canada to go pursue these opportunities and take their technology and expertise with them, whether they do so at an individual level or whether it's companies. Look, the environment here in Alberta or in Canada, and particularly the West when it comes to energy, has been devastated by the policies and the market signals that the current Liberal government is sending. So it's a problem, and it's a problem that we've so foolishly made for ourselves. Canada is a global leader. The world looks to Canada for leadership. They did so at least when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister. But now, Canada, we find ourselves in the unenviable position of being the laughingstock.
This article came out last week regarding downtown Calgary, the vacancy rate and some of the office buildings. It used to be a hub of activity.
Staggering.
You could see the activity. For the first time in history, and I'm doing this by memory, I believe it was 600,000 square foot office tower. For the first time in history, is completely empty, not one tenant.
That's true. You just go down into downtown Calgary. It used to be a very difficult thing to find parking in downtown Calgary. You can park anywhere you want now in downtown Calgary. You walk through any of the offices in the downtown plazas, and you used to be able to have to wait to get through skyways and skywalks to get connected across buildings. Now you walk through there and you feel like you're the last man on earth, because you look around and there's nobody there. And these were all office spaces where businesses were paying taxes, where they were paying employees who then paid taxes, and now it's actually a really sad story. But it's not just in Calgary; it's in places like Red Deer too. You walk into the downtown core in Red Deer, in my constituency, and you walk into some of these buildings, and half the office space is now vacant, because those businesses used to support the businesses that would work out in the industrial parks, and a wide variety and a range of those are simply gone now as well. So for lease and for sale is the most common sign I see in my riding. 5 years ago, the most common sign was help wanted. And all it took was a change in government and the Liberals to come in, and that's where we're at in Alberta.
I think you raise a good point. It's not just the big companies that have left. It's the small mom and pop shops.
Sure, accounting firms.
Absolutely.
The professional services, small organizations like that, all doing great work, having a handful of staff, 5 to 10 staff, all gone, all moved out, shut down. The only people who are thriving right now in Central Alberta are bankruptcy trustees and those that are helping with the dissolution of business.
So how do we fix this besides getting the Liberals out? Repeal Bill 69, C-69.
C-69 is obviously problem. 48, the carbon tax. The list is long. Yeah. Basically, frankly, Jamie, we need a change in government. We need every single Conservative in this country to be pulling on the oars in one direction and making sure the best thing that we can do to keep our country not only prosperous but united is a strong majority Conservative government as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And you should point out, you mentioned it before, when Alberta is strong, every province and territory within our confederation is strong, because the resources, the jobs, the wealth, all cascades.
Certainly,
from one end to the other.
Nobody in Alberta is standing up railing against the aerospace industry. We're not railing against the automobile industry. We want everybody in Canada as Canadians, Albertans as Canadians. We want our entire country to be successful. We want people in every province and every territory to be able to maximize their potential and realize their success in an environmentally sustainable and responsible, ethically responsible way. That's how we see ourselves as Albertans. That's how we see our fellow Canadians in every other province and territory and region in this country. We don't begrudge anybody the successes that they have, and we simply want the opportunity to continue to have the success that we've known in the past. Right now, the global price of oil is not the limiting factor, and it hasn't been for quite some time. It is purely policy. The policy of this federal government that is keep putting its foot on the throat of the oil and gas sector, and thereby on the throat of the Alberta economy.
Well, we're running out of time, but I just want to talk about quickly. You hear the rhetoric out of the Liberal side. We need to do green technology. We need to do this. But we just mentioned earlier that when you shut down these sectors, the companies that are making green technology, they leave. You also need a marketplace for this to happen. And if the tax structure isn't set so that these companies can grow, make money, and invest in research and development, they leave, and what is left? And you said it yourself. There's only certain sectors still making money in Alberta, and it's not the good ones. Well,
that's the problem, is when you decide to attack a certain sector of your economy, then, the consequences and fallout will be wide-reaching and long-lasting. And, I'm very hopeful and optimistic that we have a change in government here in the very near future. Once we have a new leader and have an election in this minority parliament, when it dissolves, and get back to a Conservative government making good decisions for the benefit of all Canadians. But in the meantime, I just want to encourage people, notwithstanding the somewhat somber nature of the conversation that we're having here, we are, as Canadians, resilient people. And we will. We got through one, Trudeau. We'll get through another one, but we'll come out the other end stronger for it, out of necessity. But it's just unfortunate that we've imposed this punishment somehow on ourselves as Canadians, one Canadian against another. I've never seen my country so divided, so pitted against itself along various lines and factions. I would suggest you all of them created, actually, intentionally by this Prime Minister and by this Liberal government as a way to wedge people and to basically garner votes and pit people against each other for the sake of political expediency. It's very frustrating. This is not the mature way to handle governance. It's not the mature way to run a country. And unfortunately, law-abiding Canadians and well-governed Canadians, whether it's First Nations that are making good decisions for themselves, elected chiefs and councils that are supporting these projects, all of them are suffering from these decisions.
Blaine Calkins, I'll have to have you back on the show because I want to talk to you about the outdoors, hunting, fishing, conservation. We've ran out of time, but a very important topic for your province as well.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
Thank you, Blaine Calkins, the Member of Parliament for Red Deer Lacombe. Stick around. We have Michael Barrett. He's a Member of Parliament from Eastern Ontario. He's up next going to talk about some major ethical breaches that the Liberals are, well, I guess, continuing throughout their 5-year reign here in Ottawa. So, like the program, share it, comment. Please help us get your message out. Remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint. Welcome back to The Blueprint, Canada's Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock. I have a fellow Ontarian with me, Michael Barrett. He's the Member of Parliament for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, and Rideau Lakes in Eastern Ontario. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Blaine Calkins was on before you, so you have big shoes to fill.
Yeah, Blaine is he's a good guy, and I don't know about his shoe size, but I saw him saunter out of here in some cowboy boots. So
well, he's good that way.
Yeah.
Now, before we get started, if anybody watches Michael Barrett in the House of Commons, I'm sure everyone does, you'll notice that his wardrobe is something to be admired because every day it's a blue suit, white shirt, and some kind of blue tie. So it must not take you long getting dressed in the morning. It just must be a quick process.
Well, no,
or is it a shade of white that you might?
No.
The
shirts are all white, but the different blue suit for a different day, and sometimes I'll mix it up, and there'll be a very light, check pattern on the blue suit. But there's we should invite the cameras to my house sometime to take a look at the array of blue suits and white shirts. Yeah, it's
like a Simpsons episode.
That's right. Yeah. Very, very dynamic, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, like the program, share it, subscribe, comment, because we need your help getting the conservative message out, pushing back against the Liberal agenda, and that's what Michael Barrett is going to do because he is the Shadow Minister also for Ethics. And, of course, the Liberal Justin Trudeau reign here on Ontario is just one big, long ethics breach. We have Billionaire Island, the missed French villas by the finance minister. I guess we all can, you can see some sympathy there because we all forget our French villas.
What's a French villa between
right?
friends? That's right.
Yeah, you can kind of see that. So you also had, just before the election, Justin Trudeau was found guilty of breaking our conflict of interest rules.
That's right.
Now, in this new parliament, we have the fact that Justin Trudeau just decided he didn't want to fill out his paperwork and disclose his conflicts.
Yeah, and I mean this is the pattern that we've seen under these Liberals, and it's your list was really it's alarming. I think, Jamie.
I just got started.
You just got started. I mean, we didn't even talk about clam scam. We didn't talk about the full laundry list of Liberal ethics breaches, and the Prime Minister, of course, not disclosing his where the conflicts might arise with his personal dealings, his family fortune as he describes it. he said it was an administrative oversight, and then a week later, when the list was updated, he's of course still on it. It's because he believes that there are two sets of rules, one for the governing class and one for those that they govern. And Canadians are rightly concerned about that. And I hear from Canadians, in my role as Shadow Minister for Ethics, from coast to coast to coast, who are disappointed. They were promised sunny ways and they didn't get that. And you look at this government's attention or inattention to doing the right thing and doing the right thing for Canadians. And that was evidenced, in fact, as I mentioned in the House, by the work that you did. You'd submitted an order paper question on, this is a nice softball toss.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
An order paper question on the government's handling of information. And so they disclosed that tens of thousands of times they mishandled sensitive or confidential information, personal information about Canadians. We learned that same week, the same week that I asked that question about your OPQ, that they had sent tens of thousands of records of personal information about federal government employees to all kinds of people who didn't need to see it. But that again isn't even the worst. We had Global Affairs Canada just refused to submit any information. They didn't say how many times they mishandled information or breached Canadians' privacy, because as part of the top-down leadership, Justin Trudeau feels he's above the law. And so that gives rise to his ministers perhaps feeling that they don't need to comply with Canada's laws.
Now, just for those watching or listening at home, those breaches that have happened in every good department except Global Affairs works out to about 20 breaches per working day. So if you put that in context, when Global Affairs did report back, that was 2 years ago, they, I believe, if memory serves, were number one in terms of all the departments within the federal government that had the most amount of breaches in regards to confidential information. And I would argue that's one ministry we want to see the tightest security in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you wonder why they went from having the most breaches to disclosing none, it speaks to that cover-up culture that we see with a Justin Trudeau Liberal government. And that's what we saw. We saw that obstruction. And that was revealed in the Trudeau Report 2 that was conducted by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. And he found that he found that the Prime Minister had contravened the Act. He had broken the law. But he also said that he was obstructed in getting the answers. And we know that when the RCMP have been asked to do investigations surrounding the breaches and the conduct of the Prime Minister, they didn't say, well, there was no wrongdoing committed. Well, we can't productively pursue an investigation, is the quote that was replied with. Well, that's because they use the tools that are intended for in proper use to protect confidential information and to protect Canada's interests and national defense and security. They use it to protect their buddies. And this cover-up culture that they have is used to shield the Prime Minister and his friends from proper oversight and from the same laws that you and I and that all Canadians have to abide by.
Well, if you remember in the last Parliament, the Liberal government tried to change the rules within how Parliament works. So you have the governing party trying to change the way the legislative body works. And of course, the Conservatives, along with the NDP, were able to have a filibuster and actually shut the Liberals down on that. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it goes to how they think and how they operate. It's the we know best. And why bother having an opposition? Because we're just smarter than everyone else.
Right, and we've heard that in committee since coming back following the election. The Liberals want they still act as if they have that majority, and they want to use it to shut down proper investigation and proper oversight of their work. But Canadians put them on notice during the last election, and we've certainly seen in recent days that Canadians are maybe having a bit of a post-election hangover in terms of the government that they got. And so, our job as the official opposition is to hold them to account, and we're going to continue to do that. And last week we had an issue where our country's being shut down with rail blockades and at the ports and on major roads. And the government's talking about reviving legislation that they let die on the order paper when they were the majority. And they used time allocation on every bill that they wanted to get through. But while the country is in crisis, many crises actually, we have the blockades and we have coronavirus, and this government wants to talk about anything except the issues of the day. And we have the parliamentary assistant to the government House Leader talking about Parliament just not sitting on Fridays, when on a Friday we want to talk about issues of the day, tech frontier. We want to talk about the carbon tax being ruled unconstitutional in Alberta, and these Liberals, like I said, just want to talk about anything but oversight in their cover-up culture. And it's concerning, but Canadians can rest assured that Canada's Conservatives are here holding this government to account.
I think it's important to also mention and remind people that in the last Parliament, the Liberals tried to get rid of Friday sitting days. So I don't know what it is about these Liberals. They just are trying everything to get out of actually working and doing their jobs.
Yeah, that's right. And this past week, we said that we wanted the government to focus on the Friday while we have roads, bridges, and ports shut down. Can do your job today. Today of all days, before we go into the weekend, worried about propane shortages, people freezing in the dark, grocery store shelves being empty, and again, them talking about something that they let die on the order paper in the last session. So that's what we're here for, is to hold them account, and we're going to keep doing that.
So what's the path forward? We're in a minority parliament. We outnumber them, if you count all the opposition parties, we outnumber them in parliament, but not only on committees. So how can we use the tools that we have effectively so that we can continue to shine light on these ethical breaches that the Liberals seem to embrace so fondly?
Well, it's about reaching across party lines, and oftentimes people think that that's about working with the government. And unfortunately, when we're revealing their misdeeds, as is often the case, unfortunately, and I've said to people, Jamie, that I would hope that I would be, the most underutilized and most bored shadow minister around the table. But alas, that's not the case with these Liberals. And so we have to work with and find common issues with the other opposition parties and get their support so that we can have proper investigation and oversight on all kinds of things. And what we're doing on the Canada-US-Mexico agreement is a great example. And so we have the opposition parties who are pushing for a proper study of that legislation, which the government wants us to pass. As if they were in a majority, they want to ram it through without showing the details to Canadians, to stakeholders who they shut out of their consultations. And I'm doing air quotes for those of you that are listening to the podcast, because we just heard today that Canadian dairy farmers weren't involved in the consultations. It's just one example of many stakeholder groups who weren't consulted by this government before entering into the most significant trade agreement with our most significant trading partner. And so we have to find that common ground, just like we did with the study on our relationship with China. Where we have the opposition parties work together, pass that in the House against the wishes of the Liberals, because again, that's about oversight. And so once we get to committee, we work together. We work across party lines to call witnesses that will shine a light on what the Liberals don't want us to know when it comes to their inactions and misdeeds.
Michael Barrett, Member of Parliament for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island, and Rideau Lakes, the Shadow Minister for Ethics as well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know the Liberals keep you busy with the Ethics Watch, but I appreciate the time and talking a bit about what we've been up to. And you're a good guy for doing that. So
thanks very much, Jamie.
No problem. Remember, new content every single week. We need your help to get the Conservative message out. So like the program, share it, comment, subscribe. Help us push back against this never-ending left-wing agenda that seems to be pushing forward. We can do it. We need your help doing that. But remember, it's low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.